In this video, we're going to talk all about the new command point and command ability rules that were released by Games Workshop for Age of Sigmar 2.0.
Okay.
Welcome, Wargamers. My name is Doug with 2+ Tough, and like I said, today we're talking all about the new command points, as much as we know about them, and command abilities and how that kind of fits into the new edition of AOS. Now, before I begin diving into that, go ahead and head over to Instagram and give me a follow. Here is my address over there, and you'll be able to follow my progress going on with a new army that I just started of the Moon Clan Grots. So I'm very, very excited for that. Have a lot of pictures. I'm going to try and detail as much of it as possible, as well as some funny reactions and things like that to the stuff coming out. So go ahead, head over there, stay up to date. Now what we're going to do here is transition over to the community page. And as you can see here, we're on the main one. This is the article we're looking at, command abilities. And I'm just going to go ahead and really quickly make sure I'm still in focus here. There we go. Okay. As we can see, I'm trying to make sure my head doesn't cover up most of the actual information. So if you can't read this in terms of your working and things like that, I always tend to gloss over the rules. What's interesting to note is in this, in previous things, what I've mentioned in the last video was they always start off with, this is what we intended / envisioned this rule to be, meaning what they think Slaves to Darkness are, what they thought turn priority was meant to be. And this one actually doesn't do that. It jumps straight into the changes, which is interesting. And I do note that because it's a different tone. And this is because they're adding something completely new, and they're just kind of expanding the hero phase. So, basically they acknowledge the fact that certain heroes weren't being used. This is because maybe they have a great command ability, but you didn't want that person being your general. They were too squishy, things like that, whatever reason. They're acknowledging the fact that there are command abilities in play that just simply aren't being used, which is great. And I love that kind of perspective where they really look at the game. And so basically what they've acknowledged is, okay, here's what we're going to do. Everyone can, emphasis on the word can, use their command abilities, not just your general. But there is a catch. And they give an example here of Allegiance Nagash army led by a vampire lord, but now the White King can use their Lord of Bones ability. This is actually a perfect example where you have multiple slightly lower level heroes whose command abilities would kind of be a wash, but now you have a lot more utility. So that's a great example. I'm glad they picked that one. And they introduced this idea of command points. The twist in everyone being able to use their command abilities is that not everyone can use them all the time. To be able to use them, you have to spend this resource called a command point. And it goes into this a little bit here. You get one command point every turn of the game, and you add it to a pool, meaning they don't disappear. So I was comparing this to the malign portents rules, where you gain portent points. I don't know how you else would say that. Prophecy points is what they call them in there. And you roll a d6 every turn. Well, they've kind of taken that d6 out and said, okay, every turn you're just going to get one. Okay, so if you don't like these rules, you can just use your one command ability from your general and nothing will change. Straight up. None of this is all somewhat optional. But what this allows you to do is, say you have your general in the center and two heroes on each side, you can choose which one of them uses their command ability. That's pretty great. It adds a little bit of a resource mechanic to the game. And I think we're going to get to kind of my thoughts at the end, kind of as we've been recapping these things. They do say it adds a dynamic aspect to the hero phase, which is true because now any hero anywhere can use them. Yeah, so moving down the article, they have some great tips of like things that kind of stand out. What I'm interested to see, and it was kind of speculated on Warhammer Weekly, is that when you use a battalion, they did state in this article, you get one every turn, and then you get a bonus one if you take a battalion. So that means, I don't know if that's bonus one per turn, or just bonus one in your pool when you start the game. We don't quite know yet. We don't know, there's other ways to gain points, command points, things like that, so that'd be very interesting to see if there's more of a list building aspect to it. We don't know quite yet. One of the things that they were talking about in Warhammer Weekly was this idea of you no longer get a free artifact with a battalion, but you get a free command point, and so you can always buy artifacts with them. That would also be an interesting thing. Not confirmed, but moving into the next section, new command abilities. So currently in AOS, which I kind of wish they had focused on a little bit more, every general knows one command ability, no matter what, and that is Inspiring Presence. You pick a unit, they are immune to Battle Shock. What they did was they broke it down into, now there's 3 command abilities that every general knows. I'm sorry, every hero knows. And they reworked Inspiring Presence, so now it only works in one phase, meaning if I make myself immune to Battle Shock in my turn, and it's now my opponent's turn of that same game round, they are now subject to Battle Shock, which is a massive difference. The cool thing is that you can choose either your phase, your combat phase, Battle Shock phase, I should say, or your opponent's when to use it, so you're never wasting it. That's pretty great. At the double, you pick a friendly model, and they can, their run treats as being a straight 6 instead of rolling a die, which is great. That happens when you make the run roll. And Forward to Victory, which is basically you get to re-roll the charge roll of any particular unit. Now, what's interesting about all 3 of these command abilities is, 1, they're not necessarily used in the hero phase. They're used when you make those rolls. Okay, so that's kind of breaking hero activations out of this like actual hero phase, which is awesome. And in addition to that, if you read all of them, I'll read the Inspiring Presence one for people who can't stop if they're active or something like that, or just listening. It says, you can use this command ability at the start of the Battle Shock phase. If you do so, pick a friendly unit that is within 6 inches of a friendly hero, or 12 inches of a friendly hero that is a general. That unit does not have to take Battle Shock. All these have the same wording, where your general has a range of 12 inches to project this command ability, or any hero on the table has a 6-inch bubble. What they're doing here is really including those smaller heroes into the game more, and this is adding a lot of dynamics to it, right? Everyone can use their command abilities, and also they're all kind of acting as almost satellites for these 3 core ones, and that's pretty great. They give some examples of some troops. So here's an example of a good case for the Inspiring Presence one. They do point out a great scenario where brutes who are notoriously subject to Battle Shock, you can choose which phase they're going to need that in, rather than just putting Inspiring Presence on them and guessing that they'll need it. So that's important. At the double, they point out is great for units that can run and charge, because you auto pass the run with a 6, and then you can charge afterwards. And Forward to Victory with any unit that's summoned in or anything like that, where you're 9 inches away, drastically increases the chances of getting that charge off. So that is pretty great. And they point out, I'm going to read this line because this is actually perfect. As you can see, these command abilities all require a hero nearby, and we'd recommend having 1 to 3 smaller champions handy alongside your general, like a Crypt Haunt Courtier or the Flesh Eater Courts, or for the Flesh Eater Courts, or a Branch Witch for the Sylvaneth. How many Crypt Haunter Courtiers have you really seen? And this is the point that I'm making, where models that we didn't see a whole lot of before all of a sudden now have a reason to be on the battlefield. And they kind of wrap it up by just saying there's going to be a lot of cool stuff coming forward, cunning combos, just kind of tantalizing how much fun it's going to be. So let's head back over here and we'll talk about what this kind of is. So things we actually learned. Everyone with a command ability can use them. However, there's a resource mechanic involved in doing that. We know every turn you get 1 command point, and there seems to be multiple ways to increase that number, one of which is taking a battalion, you get +1. We don't know if that's +1 per turn or +1 at the beginning of the game. My gut tells me it's +1 at the beginning of the game, as it has to do with list building. Your pool of command points does not go away every turn like it does in Malign Portents, but it is something you can accrue, and then if you save them and bank them, you can have 1 mega turn or spread them out throughout the game like we currently do. And that we can functionally play the exact same way as we have been if you just use your general's command ability once per turn. Right, that's what we currently do, and you can absolutely do that. In addition, they gave us 3 now generic command abilities for everyone to use, and they can be used by your general and heroes, and they'll have different ranges based on if it's a general or not. And that pretty much sums up what the article was actually about. Now, this is what a lot of us had predicted in terms of when they first said everyone can use command abilities, people freaked out and started coming up with these ridiculous combos. And we, as community people, so Warhammer Weekly, myself, I'm trying to think, Rolling Bad, came up with the idea there's going to be a resource mechanic there. Just everyone going all the time doesn't make a lot of sense. But this is going to increase the choices that you have and also the harder tactical decisions that you're going to have to make, especially because some of these command abilities you see in factions like Death Rattle or Slaves to Darkness, they're all great. And choosing the right one for the right job is going to be a tactic. So I think it's going to add a lot of depth. Sorry, here I got my notes here. Pull those up. I want to compare it here really quickly to the 40k command point system, because I think it's worth noting. So in 40k, you build your list, and your list determines how many command points you have. And you have these rather large pools depending on how good or easily you can game the list building mechanic. So for example, like Imperial Guard can easily get 14 command points from the start. They have artifacts and resources that allow you to recycle those throughout the game. So you can theoretically end the game with more than you started. It's just the way they game the system there. And so I don't think we're going to see that kind of command point bloat based on what we've seen here, which is it doesn't seem like list building is the main generation source of command points. It seems like it's a possibility with the battalion one that we know of, but it seems like it's much more of a every turn you get a little bit extra and you can bank them, right? I think the focus is going to be less on list building design to get your command points and more on, you know, you're going to have X many throughout the game. How are you going to bank them and use them and things like that? I think is definitely going to be the focus. And I think that's really great. The problem we've seen with 40k command point system is that either if you have what they call them stratagems, is abilities that use these command points, stratagems, you have an immediate advantage to anyone who doesn't. However, with AOS, I've spent the day after I saw this article looking at some of the sub-factions. And so, for example, I'm starting a Moon Clan Grot army. They have, I think, 3 people with command abilities. They have the Grot Shaman, War Boss. I'm sorry, the Malign Portents guy. He's not just the Shaman. Can't think of his full name. But the Malign Portents guy, the War Boss, and the War Boss on Squig. Those are your 3 command abilities. And being able to envision how they all kind of work together, I see a lot of possibilities. Point is, small factions that don't have battle tomes now have a far more interesting way to play the game. Especially when you consider the 3 that everyone gets. Like, that's going to be massive. So I think the level playing field between factions that have battle tomes and people that don't, I think is going to be far less cattywampus, if you will, than in 40k, people who have codexes and people who don't. I think that's a great thing. It's a great thing for the game when Grand Alliance armies can still play at a certain level. I love the fact that it forces you to get your command points throughout the game. The +1 per turn, I think, is phenomenal, and by that I mean, you know, you play an Imperial Guard player in 40k, and they just have this unwieldy storage of command points, and it's just rough, because you know that they can play this huge bank of abilities at any given time. With this, I can look at my opponent and say, okay, well, you burnt all yours last time, so at most you're going to have 1. What could you possibly do with 1? And if it's my turn, probably Inspiring Presence is probably the best one to do defensively. Like, you can really think about what your opponent has at their disposal, what they're going to get, and kind of really get those cogs working. You can kind of game this mechanic a little bit and be intelligent about your decisions because of it. Moving on, I think there are some clear winners for this, and not ones you'd expect. So the obvious ones is small level characters. Aspiring Deathbringers, a lot of the smaller Chaos guys, definitely you're going to see them on the table. For certain factions, like, for example, Moon Clan Grots, like I'm building, you're going to see a huge benefit because you can have redundancy built in. So if my super squishy War Boss, who's my general, gets killed, and I have a second, and they're super cheap War Boss, I can still use command abilities, and that's awesome. So that builds in there. You're going to see a lot more variety of smaller characters, smaller heroes doing cool things. In addition, I want to show you this. Let me move my camera back over. I have a guy who's going to love this. Gordrak. Everyone loves Gordrak. The reason I bring out Gordrak is because he represents one of the kinds of heroes that you see where his command ability is once per battle. Now here's the thing, is that you can take Gordrak, use this once per battle ability, and you don't lose utility because you still have more options, either A, from other heroes and their command abilities, or the big thing is you have a far more, I guess, deep pool of abilities to pull from with the 3 that they previewed. So this, to me, just raises his value immensely, where he can use this, and then when he's done, the Mega Boss can keep using his, right? You don't lose efficiency by taking a guy that has a one-use ability. And I know there are more besides Gordrak. I just couldn't think of any on the fly. And then people were questioning, like, what is the value of Archaon? Well, Archaon's ability still works the same, except he lets everyone, if you're not familiar, Archaon's ability is that everyone with a command ability around him gets to use theirs. It's the same ability, but now it doesn't cost you command points. And that's going to be very interesting to see how that pans out. So kind of coming back here and sort of closing out my thoughts. The big winners of this are going to be your small heroes, super squishy ones like my army has that you can stuff a list full of them. And then on the flip side, any large heroes that have a one-use command ability are going to gain immensely, because now you can put that value in army building on other heroes in your list. So I think that's going to be incredibly cool. I think you're going to see... I'm trying to debate this in my mind, and I want to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. I think this is going to be a mechanic that when you combine it with the kind of loosely hinted at the super spells, like the spells that perpetually stay on the table, like the big monsters and things like that. I think when you combine those things, if they have access across all Grand Alliances, those small sub-factions that didn't get a lot of love are going to all of a sudden be able to play with the big boys. And by that I mean this. My friend Mark has a Warherd army. It's the big Minotaur, Bulgor guys. And I talk about this army all the time. It's kind of my benchmark for progress. Okay? Right now, Warherd is in a sad place. There's like 4 models in the army line, and you can take Grand Alliance Chaos. But that's really about it. That's all you got. What I'm excited about is the idea of him being able to do more things. It's a beautiful painted army. I'll show you pictures at some point. But that is my benchmark for those small sub-factions that have, hipster AOS fan followings that people love, and they're very iconic, and they have great models. But they just can't play at the same level of other factions without a little bit of a handicap. And so Malign Portents, the reason I was so excited for that as a addition to the game was because it allowed Mark's army to do stuff. He doesn't have a wizard. I almost said a shaman. He doesn't have a wizard. They have very few command trait abilities in the faction, anything like that. Things like this. Okay, well, he just gained 2 more command abilities. He gained the ability for him to, or a reason for him to take more than one Bulgor, which I think is the leader guy, because he can use those abilities all over the place. He can do much more. Now, one thing, and I've heard people complain about this right away, was the idea in this article, something is missing, and I think it's a crucial piece that we should assume is coming. And that is the idea that you can't use more of one command ability. No, this is what I mean. I'm sorry, let me back up on that. You can't use a command ability more than once. That's how I was trying to say it. There was some initial negativity showed up on my Facebook page with a gentleman who said there was a Daughters of Cain ability, I think on the Hag Queen, that lets a unit pile an attack. I think that's what it is. One of those units has an ability to let them pile an attack one more time. And they were saying, this is super broken. It's terrible for the game because now Witch Elves are going to keep piling in and attacking for as many command points as you have. And my thought is, if you look at 40k, you can't use the same command ability more than once in a phase. Okay? That's important. If they did the same thing here and maybe said, more than once per turn or whatever like that, it just nullifies those things. Then the only benefit you get to having more than one of the same person or character or model, unit, whatever with a command ability is redundancy. And that really helps the little guys like Grot war bosses, but it doesn't help things that never had a problem in the first place. characters who stay around till the end of the game were never really a threat, like in terms of losing their command ability. By this I mean, I'm sorry, I'm trying to break this down a little bit in a more tangible way. If your character never really died, and you never really, like, in a general game, never felt the loss of their command ability, it doesn't affect them. There's no reason to take more than one of them. If you have characters that start to die throughout the game, or you need those command abilities to stay active in the game, you can take more than one hero to get it, and it'll stay with you throughout the game. If I take 2 Grot War bosses, for example, even though one is using their command ability the entire game, because you can't double up in my little scenario in my head, I'm going to let you kill one. I can be very aggressive and let you kill one, knowing that I have a backup and now he can start using that command ability. And so this is kind of my thoughts. I think it should be assumed that you can't use the same command ability more than once in a turn. That's my opinion. I know it's not written here. I think frankly should have been, just to kind of confirm that, but it's what it is. As far as other ways I can wildly speculate that we get new command points and things like that, I wouldn't be surprised if, just like in 40k, certain heroes coming on the table adds them to your army, or your army pool, I should say. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was a few artifacts that you recycle them, things like that. Stuff that we've seen in 40k. Just keep an eye out for. Again, none of this is confirmed, it's just what we have seen. So friends, tell me what you think about the command point stuff. I'm going to ask that you keep it not positive. You can have constructive thoughts that are negative and not like it. It's your opinion. But I've seen debates get pretty darn heated online, and I'm not a fan of that on my channel. So go ahead and leave your comments down below what you're excited about. Do you have heroes that have been sitting there collecting dust that you're all of a sudden going to bring out? I know I'm looking forward to running multiple war bosses for my Moon Clan, and then also a bunch of minor heroes that I never even thought to purchase for Chaos for my Slaves to Darkness, because I never was going to field them as a general, and they're going to be a part of my army now. So leave your comments down below and I'll respond to them. Thank you guys so much for watching, and happy wargaming. Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I want to introduce you to some awesome folks. These are my patrons over on Patreon, and they make this show possible by their direct support of me to buy battle tomes and Black Library books and all the material I need and the hardware support that I need to make this stuff possible. And if you'd like to join them, go ahead and click over to the Patreon page, to the link in the description down below, and you'll be introduced to a really awesome community of people talking about the hobby, sharing what they're painting. I invite them to be part of polls to decide what content comes next. I raffle off every battle tome that I review, and we're having some great fun and discussions over there. So go ahead and check it out. Now, if you can't support in that way, that's completely fine. I'm just so glad that you watched this video here today. And if you have an Age of Sigmar lore question, go ahead and click subscribe and leave it in the comments down below. I read every single question and comment. I respond to as many as I possibly can, but I use them all as inspiration for future videos. So go ahead and do that now. And I look forward to seeing you guys on my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Thank you so much for watching, and happy wargaming.